Pagbasa mula sa aklat ng Henesis. Noong mga araw na iyon, sinabi ng Panginoon kay Abraham, "Lisanin mo ang iyong bayan, ang tahanan ng iyong ama at mga kamag-anak, at pumunta ka sa bayang ituturo ko sa iyo. Pararamihin ko ang iyong mga anak at apo, at gagawin kong isang malaking bansa. Pagpapalain kita, at mapapantog ang iyong pangalan, at magiging pagpapala sa marami. Ang sa iyo'y magpapala ay aking pagpapalain. Ngunit kapag sinumpa ka, sila'y aking susumpain. Ang lahat ng mga bansa, pihong ako'y hihimukin. Na tulad mong pinagpala, sila ay pagpapalain din." Sumunod nga si Abraham sa utos ng Panginoon. Ang salita ng Diyos.
Salamat sa Diyos.
Puon pagsaka namin, pag-ibig mo'y aming hiling. Puon pag-asaka namin, pag-ibig mo'y aming hiling. Pangino'y tapat sa kaniyang salita at maasahan ang kaniyang ginawa. Minamahal niya ang gawang matapat, ang pag-ibig niya sa mundo'y lagana. Puon pag-asaka namin, pag-ibig mo'y aming hiling. Ang may takot sa Diyos at nagtitiwala sa kaniyang pag-ibig ay kinakalinga. Hindi babayang sila'y mamatay, kahit magtagutom sila'y binubuhay. Puon inasaka namin, pag-ibig mo'y aming hiling. Ang ating pag-asa'y nasa Panginoon. Siyang sanggalang natin at katulong. Ipagkaloob mo na ang aming makamit, opo ng iyong wagas na pag-ibig. Yamang ang pag-asa'y sa'yo'y nasasali. Puon pag-asaka namin, pag-ibig mo'y aming hiling. Puon pag-asaka namin, pag-ibig mo'y aming hiling.
Pagbasa mula sa Ikalawang sulat ni Apostol San Pablo kay Timoteo. Pinakamamahal kong kapatid, makihati ka sa kahirapan dahil sa mabuting balita. Sa tulong ng Diyos na nagligtas at tumawag sa atin upang tayo'y maging kanyang bayan. Ito'y ginawa niya sa pamamagitan ni Kristo Jesus, hindi dahil sa atin, kundi ayon sa kanyang layunin at kagandahang loob na inilaan sa atin bago pa magsimula ang panahon. Ngunit nahayag lamang ito nang dumating si Kristo Jesus na ating tagapagligtas. Nilupig niya ang kamatayan at inihayag ang buhay na walang hanggan sa pamamagitan ng mabuting balita. Ang salita ng Diyos.
Salamat sa Diyos.
Sumainyo ang Panginoon.
At sumayo rin.
Ang mabuting balita ng Panginoon ayon kay San Mateo.
Papuri sa iyo, Panginoon.
Noong panahong iyon, isinama ni Jesus si Pedro at ang magkapatid na Santiago at Juan. At sila'y umakyat sa isang mataas na bundok. Samantalang sila'y naroon, nakita nila na nagbagong anyo si Jesus. Nagliwanag na parang araw ang kanyang mukha at pumuting parang busilak ang kanyang damit. Nakita na lamang at sukat ng tatlong alagad, sina Moises at Elias na nakikipag-usap kay Jesus. Kaya't sinabi ni Pedro kay Jesus, Panginoon, mabuti pa'y dumito na tayo. Kung ibig ninyo, gagawa akong na tatlong kubol, isa sa inyo, isa kay Moises at isa kay Elias. Nagsasalita pa siya nang liliman sila ng isang maningning na ulap at mula rito'y may tinig na nagsabi, ito ang pinakamamahal kong anak na lubos kong kinalulugdan, pakinggan ninyo siya. Ang mga alagad ay natakot ng gayon na lamang na marinig nila ang tinig, ngunit nilapitan sila ni Jesus at hinipo. Tumindig kayo, sabi niya, huwag kayo matakot. At nang tumingin sila ay wala silang nakita kundi si Jesus. At habang bumababa sila sa bundok, inuutos ni Jesus sa kanila na huwag ninyong sasabihin kanino man ang pangyitain hanggat hindi muling nabubuhay ang anak ng tao. Ang mabuting balita ng Panginoon.
Pinupuri ka namin, Panginoong Hesukristo.
Mga minamahal ko mga kapatid sa pananampalataya, unang-unang magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Sana po nakapahinga ko kayo ng mabuti kasi bukas po ay balik ang bawat isa sa kanyang paghahanap buhay. At kung hindi ako nagkakamali, may malaking national strike yata ng public transportation dahil nga sa privatization ng public transportation po natin. Isang malaking usapin ito, hindi lamang sa sektor ng transportasyon, kundi maging ang kalalagayan ng mga mananakay natin. Kaya ipagdadasal natin na sana mabigyan ito ng magandang lunas para isa kabubuti para sa mga naglalakbay gamit ang public transportation. Mga kapatid, tayo ngayon po ay nasa ikalawang linggo sa panahon ng kuwaresma. Narinig natin malinaw ang eksena sa ating mabuting balita. Ito po ay may kinalaman sa tinatawag ng pagbabagong anyo ni Jesus o sa wikang Ingles ay the Transfiguration Scene. Nais ko pong simulan ang ating pagninilay sa isang pananaw na karamihan, ito po ang karamihan ng pananaw ng mga simpleng tao. There is this belief that life is full of suffering. We only have to be sensitive of the situations around to validate this truth. Just look at the anguish faces of families, when their loved ones are being victimized because of violence. I just cannot think of the suffering and the difficulties of the family of a victim of hazing that happened somewhere in Cavite. And if I am not mistaken, he was a student of Adamson. And at the same time, feel the burden of people in the neighborhood. Observe the hospital patients writhing with pain and sickness. Hear the cries of sorrows during funeral mass or funeral services. Watch the sad parting of loved ones at airport and terminals. We are so loaded with stories of trials of our relatives, neighbors, and friends of the suffering they experience in life. Perhaps we are also carrying unspeakable burdens ourselves that are sometimes too heavy to bear. Life is full of pain. Ika nga sa wikang Pilipino, ang buhay ay batbat ng pasakit. The second belief or the second worldview is that suffering comes from desires. Na ang paghihirap ay nagmumula sa ating mga pagnanasa, sa ating mga hinahangad na hindi natin kayang makamit. Many people are unhappy because of unfulfilled desires. Perhaps they're looking for a new house, a new car, a condo unit they want, but they don't have the means to acquire it. A beautiful face, perhaps, or body, a position or recognition they wish, but they cannot have. Desires. Marami po tayo niyan. Marami tayong hinahangad. You name it, and we have plenty of it. Oftentimes, we cannot distinguish what we actually need from our greed or even from our own wants or even simply desires. We are not really wanting in necessary things. We become only frustrated because of things we cannot have. Those many things that stem from our endless and insatiable desires and whims. There is also another mindset or another belief, and this is they view happiness simply to get rid of all the desires, or simply to get rid of all difficulties and problems of life. Let us ask ourselves, why am I suffering? What is the cause of my suffering? If we have an honest examination of ourselves, most likely we can trace our sadness to our desires, to our whims and caprices. I just remember a beautiful line coming from Buddha, and I quote, that in order to be happy, we should liberate ourselves from desires. However, a worldview contends, may isang ding pananaw na ginigiit, that the world is bad and the source of evil is the world. So if you want to remove desires, is simply to detach entirely from the world. Salvation consists in achieving nirvana, and you're familiar with that word. A state where man attains a complete apathy with regard to the origin of evil, which is the world. This kind of mindset somehow isolates the person from the world. If you don't want to get affected by the things that are happening around it, you simply have to isolate yourselves and live in your ivory palace. But that is not how Christianity understands the world. The world is good. In fact, in the creation story, God saw all that He had made, and it was very, very good. And that is part of the line in the book of Genesis. Salvation is that gain by escaping from the world, by confronting and struggling within the world. To be saved To experience redemption is simply to face the sufferings of this world with meaning in Christ through his cross, so that we may share his resurrection. There is no ladder to happiness. And in the mindset of the church, it is the ladder of the way of the cross. Salvation then comes in union with Christ, who lived, suffered, and died, and resurrected, and ascended into his glory in heaven. Maybe we can simplify our homily by simply saying, we have this expression in Filipino, kapag walang tiyaga, walang nilaga. Kapag hindi mo paghihirapan, magiging walang saysay. Ang isang mahalagang bagay, pinagtsatsagaan mo, pinaghihirapan, binibigyan mo ng panahon, pinagdadasalan mo. Hindi huma. This is the context of our celebration this Sunday. The transfiguration of Christ. He was transfigured simply not out of nothing. He was transfigured because he has to undergo suffering and death. And after which, he would experience resurrection. Hindi ba? Ganyan din ang karanasan natin. Kapag hindi mo pinaghihirapan ang isang bagay, babaliwalain mo lang. Pero kapag mahalaga ang isang bagay, ipaglalaban mo, pagtsatsagaan mo, paghihirapan mo. Christ transfigured before his disciples so that they could visualize that the final end of sufferings is simply the glorious destiny being with God. There are times, however, when we see our trials as God's punishment to us. And so we complain, why me, Lord? Bakit ako? Bakit hindi siya? Bakit hindi yung kapitbahay ko? Bakit yung kasamahan ko na hindi nagsisimba? Bakit ako? What wrong did I commit to deserve this terrible problem? Nonetheless, sufferings are not punishments from God. They are part and parcel of life, just as it is natural for us to experience joy in life. Problems are part of life. In fact, pains and sufferings are necessary for one to experience authentic joy in life. You yourselves know that very well by your daily life experiences. Madalas kong sinasabi, bakit pinagtsatsagaan ng magulang ang gabi, maski mahirap, hindi ba parang may mailagay na pagkain kinabukasan? Bakit pinagtsatsagaan natin na maghintay ng kahaba-haba sa kalye para lang makasakay alang-alang sa pamilya? Bakit magbubuwis tayo ng ating kapalaran sa ibang bansa kung hindi alang-alang lamang sa pamilya? How can we truly love others in their sufferings when we ourselves have not suffered? How can we learn obedience to God if we have not experienced trials and pain? We suffer not for its own sake, but for Christ. Let me clear about that. We suffer not for its own sake, but for Christ. to experience the power of his resurrection and share in his sufferings and become like him in his death. Let me end our reflection. There is this beautiful line written by a noted author, C.S. Lewis, and I quote, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts in our pains." Kung sa Tagalog, bumubulong ang Diyos sa ating kaligayahan, nagsasalita sa ating budhi, at sumisigaw sa ating paghihirap. Beautiful written by this author. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. Simply means He is joining with us. And so, we rise and be not afraid, as Jesus says in the Gospel.